I'm Andy Lee, Network and Cloud Security Specialist at Bytes Software Services.
And I'm Spencer Branson. I'm a sales specialist here for UKI here at Palo Networks.
So I think one of the areas that's good to talk about is what the market is saying about SASE on that side. So one of the areas that we've looked at is Gartner. And Gartner have said that by 2025, 80% of enterprises will be looking at or adopting a SASE or SSE strategy in place. Another thing that they've said is by 2026, 60% of customers will be looking at an SD-WAN solution as part of a SASE offering as well. Another area, 33% of new SASE deployments by 2025 will have a SASE single vendor offering in place. Spencer, is that something that you're seeing in the market as well from your side of things? Would you say that Gartner are right in their predictions there?
I think so. I think very much if we take it from a broad perspective, and if we take what's actually really driving sort of adoption of infrastructure as a service, it's just a very dispersed world that we now live in. So, if we look at back where we've come from 10, 15 years ago, applications, data resided heavily in data center. Now, of course, we've seen with the boom in public cloud, applications being refactored as SaaS, right? And it's really changing the landscape of how we think about connectivity from a user, a branch, out towards a data center. It's become slightly archaic in its thinking. So it's creating that kind of user branch direct application architecture that is really driving what I see as adoption of SASE.
I guess one of the areas that we hear talked about is SSE or Secure Service Edge. So what is that? I guess the key areas that we see from customers are things like web replacement, VPN replacement. Those are probably the two main topics that we see, but now we're also seeing customers adopt things like DLP and CASB as well into their estate. What are the key areas that you're seeing customers when they talk about the SSE space?
Well, just to kind of expand on what we were just talking about there, just in terms of obviously applications being sort of having been dispersed and refactored into SaaS and moved to public cloud and development being within public cloud, we can also say that, our workforce has also become very disparate, right? Yeah. So actually users are now working from anywhere. We're not actually solely as we were, perhaps maybe pre-pandemic, for 80% of the time in office. We are very transient between how we think about, site, working at home, working in coffee shop. But what we really are starting to see is that how do we ensure that we get consistent security outcomes, right? So from an SSE perspective, it should be policy or how we think about security should be the same wherever the application or the data resides. So when I think about kind of SSE, and I think about now in terms of, not just in terms of user to application, but also device, right? So how do I want to connect? It doesn't necessarily have to be so predominant heavily based on the agent. We are starting to see the explosion of browser-based security, right? So from our perspective, it's also having that kind of security outcomes that we're driving wherever the user is, but also user experience as well. How do we ensure that the user is gaining supreme levels of connectivity and remains productive for the business? So, really interesting sort of area of the market right now. And there's so much innovation really coming from us in this.
SD-WAN, so we kind of see this come up when people are looking at expensive MPLS lines. They've got multiple sites around the world. It's difficult for those users to connect in from, say, China or the Middle East back to the UK head office on that side. With the growing adoption of cloud, though, do you still think SD-WAN is going to be a big area for businesses on that side?
For me, yeah, absolutely. I see SD-WAN as absolutely critical as a factor of SASE. And if I think about just in terms of our SD-WAN offering, for me, it's very much in the way of actually how we can actually ensure application performance. So actually passing through application traffic in real-time network conditions. What also is really, I think, actually driving SASE narrative is that the single UI, being able to sort of manage your users, your branch sites, irrespective of where they are globally, and being able to provision, being able to actually implement dynamically, pervasively, at pace and scale is absolutely critical in the world that we live in today. You've only just got to look at the sense of, in terms of the way that the real estate market is moving, right? In terms of people are wanting shorter lease agreements right now, right? And of course, when you think about that, they need a network and security model that is agile, flexible, and you need to be able to manage that through a single UI. And again, I think it's a really, really important part of what is SASE.
So then we bring it all together with SASE altogether. So we've got SD-WAN and SSE. The challenge we sometimes find there is SD-WAN sits within the networking space. SSE sits in security. Do you think there should still be conflict there, or do you think these areas need to come together to work together to produce that single solution to manage both areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are starting to see sort of that kind of working together in collaboration, right? I think absolutely that's coming, because I think that ultimately it's the security and the networking outcomes that are ever more predictable. You want to have an environment where you have less, fewer point products to manage, fewer technologies to manage. And really, I think that actually what that helps you to do is to reduce your security gaps. What we still see quite often today is that in terms of how people would disseminate or provide security posture to users when in office, right? Maybe sat behind a Palo Alto Networks firewall, but then actually perhaps maybe thinking about security in a slightly different sense that perhaps isn't based on the same zero trust principles that you have when you're in the branch. So for us, it's creating that sort of sense of consistency. But from the management side of it, having that kind of, as I said earlier, single UI, so being able to see where your users are, being able to monitor application performance, being able to really drill into actually the kind of the issues that you may have, right, through what we have in terms of ADEM that sits within SSE, again, is a really, really fundamental part. But what we're really focused on is constantly just striving to ensure that our customers get the best level of experience. So again, the innovation that we were talking about just earlier, some of that stuff around looking at the application, really how can we ensure greater performance? And again, there'll be an opportunity to sort of elaborate on that further with customers, with yourselves, but it's certainly an area that is, we're driving great innovation through.
Okay, so here we can see kind of the SASE architecture behind me on the screen. But one of the areas that we're seeing quite a lot of challenges from customers is around browser security. How do they secure users when they're accessing the browser? How do contractors stay secure when they're accessing internal applications and tools? Is that something that you guys are seeing at Palo Alto Networks?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's actually driving many of the conversations that we're actually having around SASE right now. I think organizations that are looking to reduce or take away their costly VDI environments, right, actually see the benefit of working with a single browser, right, in terms of actually having security delivered through the browser. And I think if we look at it right now in terms of, just the kind of the way that applications are now ultimately factored, right, as SaaS and via, internet services, browser security makes perfect sense, right? So what we're actually sort of being able to do is actually provide you with that either or. So it means that you haven't got to have something as intrusive as an agent or a pack file on a device, and actually the connectivity can just be delivered through the browser. So from that perspective, it's really, really sort of changing the way customers can think about, actually, could I actually just have people BYOD accessing corporate applications safely through a browser? Do I actually need to have these costly refresh of endpoints every 2 to 3 years, right? Do I just give people the responsibility? So it's really, really changing the way we think about the endpoint, connectivity, and how we purchase endpoints as well. It's certainly an exciting part of our SASE offering at the moment.
Great. Spencer, we've worked together before, but I think it would be great to understand the relationship and the benefits of working with partners, so Palo Alto Networks and Bytes Software Services.
Oh, for me, partnerships are so important. And if I just think about the partnership that we currently have today, one of the things I've always felt so assured of in terms of working with Bytes is the groundwork that you've done, right? So in everything from actually, if we look into in terms of the point of discovery, and that actually just means in terms of helping the customer make sense of the business issues and challenges that they have today, but how they can also meet their initiatives. So we're actually thinking about technology, not in the eyes of the lens of us or Bytes, we're also thinking about the customer. What does it mean really to the customer? And that's always been something in terms of working with you guys that I've always been so incredibly impressed with. But I think it's not just that point of actually where we're selling product or services, right? The sales side of it and relationship management, which is all very important. But for me, it's the day two. It's the operational, it's the thereafter. And so I always feel in any relationship or account that we've had, it's always been a partnership in the sense of if we have any sort of pitfalls or troubles along the way, we'll help meet them together. And I think for a customer, that's so reassuring to know that if you are passing out to sort of like part of your network to infrastructure as a service, that, we both as a partnership take a very, very strong sense of responsibility. And we make sure that the customer receives and achieves everything they want with SASE and beyond.
Thanks very much, Spencer. I think it's great that you touch on those specific areas as well, because as you can see behind me, these are kind of all the areas that we can help with from a Palo Alto side of things, and also as a market review in general. We run free workshops, we can do estate reviews, we can do professional services, we can do support conversations. There's loads that we can do to help customers on their journey towards SASE. And if anyone has any questions around that, they can reach out to their account manager or their security specialist like myself.